Hi, I'd like us to start the webinar. So, I'm going to just hand it over to Chris right away.
Great, thanks Alan. Alex and I are actually super excited to be here. We are from Uber. We work on the Uber developers platform. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk to you guys about today. And I think this will actually be fairly casual. We'll just sort of go through some stuff. We've got some slides. We've got a live demo. I'm going to start off talking about Rides Request API, and then we're going to talk about Rush. So to begin, you can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Medium. I'm going to dive right into it. So why is building for the Uber developer platform interesting and exciting? Well, hopefully many of you already know what Uber is and what it does. For those of you who don't, it's a very convenient and affordable way of getting from point A to point B. But what you might not know is that Uber is also a global company. We have presence in over 60 countries around the world, 450 cities. We've got 1 million driver partners who are on the platform who are helping people get wherever they need to go. We've got millions of riders, and just, I think, was it last week, 2 weeks ago? I don't know, things happen so fast. We hit 2 billion trips. So the platform growth is incredible. I should point out the first 1 billion trips happened in the first 5 years last December. So we've done another 1 billion in the last 7 months. So you can see how the growth is accelerating. When we talk about the Uber developer platform, we like to talk about building moving experiences, and that actually means something pretty specific to us. In particular, in terms of building, we like working with developers, opportunities for them to find interesting success, novel applications, forging partnerships, providing tools, helping people be more productive. And this sort of ties into an Uber cultural value that we hold dear, which is to let builders build. In terms of moving experiences, the way we think about that is to create and help bring into creation products that create joy, that help people move from A to B, things move from one place to another, and ultimately to make magic, which is another one of our cultural values. So one of the things that I think is also important, if you think about Uber just as being kind of about transportation, I think the mission is actually much larger. Specifically, it's about creating a technology and logistics platform, an underlying substrate that other developers and companies and brands and services can build upon. We're not just building an app. We're actually building something that's a very deep technology platform. And already there are thousands of companies that are relying on us to power their businesses. So again, typically you think of Uber as getting a person from point A to point B, but there's a little bit more to that. Specifically, there are moments right before when you sort of pull out your phone and you know that you actually want to go someplace. We call that the intent to ride. And then there's also what we call the future intent. So in other words, if you want to, let's say, book a ride in the future, you want to schedule a ride, or you want to be reminded, let's say that you have a trip to the airport coming up, we will send you a notification that your ride is ready. Specifically to talk about some of the API surface areas, with the future intent, again, we have an API that allows you to set a reminder, and that'll notify you when it's time to go. And then in terms of getting a ride, requesting a ride, we have several different ways of doing that. We have a ride request button. We have a widget that allows you to essentially access the full Uber experience through the mobile web. And we also have deep links. So if you have a native mobile app, you can link directly into the Uber app, and the Uber app will take care of everything from getting the car, managing the trip, showing the map, doing payments, and everything like that. And then there's also details of the ride itself. So if your app actually requests the ride, you have access to information about that trip that nobody else, no other third-party developer will have, as well as access to the history and information about the user, him or herself. There are 3 ways right now to use the Uber platform. Again, getting a ride for your users, reaching people while they're on their trip, and doing delivery on demand. And for right now, I just want to focus on just getting a ride for your users with the Ride Request API. So what this is showing essentially is Citymapper's integration of Uber into their app. So Citymapper is this great app if you are in San Francisco or other cities like that. It's a really useful way of actually getting from point A to point B using transit, using just walking, using biking, or of course using Uber. And in this screen right here, we're actually showing a number of the different features of the API. We're showing the product listing on the left, so UberX, UberXL, those are a list of products. We're showing price estimates, so that's how much the ride is going to cost to get you from that place to where you're going. And then the Estimates API, which tells you how far away the nearest Uber is going to be. And what they've done, as opposed to implementing the entire Uber trip journey, they're using deep linking, and so I'll show you what that looks like. So once you tap one of these entries, it'll actually take you out of the Citymapper app and move you into the Uber app with your destination preset, ready to book the ride. So that's using deep links. The other thing that our API can be used for is actually recreating the entire Uber experience. And so in the case of the Pebble Watch, you can actually do the entire experience, from finding out where the nearest car is, how far away it is, to choosing different products, to watching your journey, and then concluding that. And so the API gives you that full flexibility. One of the other integrations that we did recently that I'm really excited about, we launched last December, was in Facebook Messenger. And this allows you to request a ride conversationally. So when you're in the context of talking to someone in Facebook, if you say, oh, like, let's go meet up at, I don't know, this bar or something like that, or someplace else, maybe work, essentially, you'll get the opportunity to request a ride to that destination. And so this sort of gives you a sense for how that works. I don't know either. I don't know where that is. So we're really excited about the conversational context as a place for delivering the Uber experience. We think this is a great way for people to discover Uber. And we also are looking at a number of different emerging applications in that space. Some of the other interesting opportunities also exist in things like home automation. So this is something you guys worked on, right?
Yes. This is actually, don't think of it just about the app. So just a little story of how Apigee and Uber started working together. We participated in a hackathon for the Philips Hue, and we decided to combine the Hue APIs with the Uber APIs. So essentially what it does is that when you order an Uber, the lights in your house would go from orange to green as it gets closer. And once you're actually into the car, you can actually, people can track their ride. And we've actually added an extra feature so that there's a little feature in our app so you can actually tell the person, your host or wherever, that there's a problem with the ride too. And you can actually turn on the lights, like turn it on red to help them out. So the cool thing about this is that you can really extend the trip experience, just the entire trip experience, any way you want with these APIs. And kind of our next iteration is bringing in the Amazon Echo.
Oh, totally.
So now Amazon Echo, Amazon also allows you to order your Uber API. Order Uber via
voice.
API, right. And then being able to have the lights actually indicate when the ride is there means you don't actually have to have a smartphone at all, right? And so it's totally seamless experience.
And right now, as far as I know, like with Alexa, you can't do sort of like a push-based thing, right? Where you can't like talk to a user through Alexa. So in some ways, this is a nice way of having some ambient kind of notification system.
That's right. That's exactly it. We basically leverage the Uber APIs to give us a notification of what's going on in
Totally. That's awesome. Cool. So exactly. So like things like that are definitely things that we think are awesome applications and use cases for the platform. And I think you guys kind of just took the API and built it.
And we won the hackathon.
Yeah. So that's right. Well done. So one of the things that's also I think really valuable to think about is all the different verticals that Uber actually is serving right now. You know, whether it's just points of interest, local guides, things like that, travel, hospitality, event planning, logistics, all that kind of stuff are places that we think Uber makes a lot of sense, and we've had a lot of traction so far in working with partners in those contexts. So if we talked about getting a ride for your users, the other part of the ride request API or that context is trip experiences. And so sort of what you were talking about is a prelude into that, because with trip experiences, you can now start to use the user's context to do interesting things. Now, why is this interesting? Well, as I mentioned at the outset, one of the exciting things about building on the Uber platform is just the sheer number of riders that we have, but also what those riders represent. So if we've hit 2 billion trips and the average trip length is around 20 minutes, that's about 40 billion minutes of free time spent in Ubers, where you have this moment where people are looking for something to do, whether it's to be more productive, whether it's to get sort of a moment of calm, whether it's to take care of like a phone call or something like that, depending on the product that they've chosen. Actually, I did the math on this, and this is about 76,000 years of time since Uber has been in existence that could have been used to deliver like useful and valuable productivity like services and stuff like that.
Instead of Facebook updates.
Instead of just Facebook updates.
LOL cat.
And Facebook's great. Hopefully there are people in Ubers right now like watching the stream. But if you want to do something specifically while you're on the go, we think this is an API and a piece of context that previously has never been available before. So when we think about this, a good trip experience is really targeting, when someone has free time. So they've got a little extra thought, space or whatever. They're looking for news or information, and that information could be cut, for example, to their ride. It's based on how long the trip is going to be. So that's essentially, exactly whether they have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or whatever. Like if you're heading down to the airport, you've got, 20 minutes, and that's really useful to target. You also know where they're coming from, their origin, and their destination. So each of those things are useful contextual information that developers could use to build really engaging applications. And that's also, of course, either directed to someone that's in the car itself, or in your case, to like their home before they even arrive. So we're finally going to look at some code. I know it's like, how long is it? 15 minutes in, and we're finally looking at code. But anyways, this will give you a little bit of a sense for what's available via the Trip Experiences API. Now, I should point out that the reason why the Trip Experiences API is interesting, we launched this just in January, so it's not been that long, is that, again, as I mentioned, if you request a ride from your app, you have access to the details of that trip, right? Because you requested it, and so you need to know what the state of the trip is. But you as an app developer don't have access to any of the other trips that user has or will take. And so you're not able to build additional context for that user. So the Trip Experiences API is interesting because it allows, with the user's explicit consent, to provide third parties access to that information so they can start to use that context reliably. So you can see here that even if the trip is initiated from some other app, you're getting access to a bunch of different pieces of information. And so if we dive into this a little bit, you can see the types of applications that we're thinking of. So in this case, you can look at the rider's pickup location, like where they're coming from, or their destination, frankly, and deliver like local news about that place. In some ways, we think about this as a sense of kind of like, it's a way of improving both like search and kind of like a GPS that's anticipatory. It understands where someone's going to be or where they're going, and it can change the content of their app to match that. So like, for example, if I set my home city as San Francisco and I open up, I don't know, CNBC or something, or some app like that, and it knows that I'm actually heading to San Jose, then it can provide information before I arrive. In a similar vein, local guides also have the opportunity of utilizing this future context to customize the content that they're showing. So, I constantly will find myself in Ubers opening up, Yelp or Foursquare or TripAdvisor, depending on where I am, and having to sort of do the manual search about where I'm about to be, even though Uber already knows where I am. So I would prefer to just sort of let Uber tell these apps where I'm going to be and skip that whole step of having to do that search. So we think that's also super interesting because it improves the whole experience and makes people more productive. And one of my personal favorites, which just was released a couple weeks ago, is my personal bot. It's called Messina Bot. It's on Facebook Messenger. My bot does a couple things for me. It provides just information, sort of factual stuff about me. It allows you to schedule office hours, and it allows you to read my cocktail recipes. But the thing that's actually super interesting about it is this, which is if you connect my bot to your Uber account, Uber will then tell my bot where it is you're going, some destination. And based on the destination, it'll then look up the tips that I've left on Foursquare and then bring them back through my bot to you. Yeah. So basically, like, and I have this experience. It's actually super interesting. I've been on Foursquare for years, and I have had many friends who have connected their Uber accounts to my bot. They'll be driving around San Francisco, and my bot will be like, hey, you should go like get a drink here, or like, oh, don't go there, like that's no good. In any case, so this is sort of demonstrating that ability to provide information that otherwise you wouldn't know to think about or wouldn't have access to in a moment where it's incredibly valuable and useful, and where you have some, I think, available attention, right? Because you're on your way someplace. Yeah. And so you're getting this information while you're, before you even arrive without having to do any extra work.
Just before we move on to the demos, I just want to have a little conversation about other use cases, especially a lot of enterprises. What are some of the use cases? So I personally actually got pinged just coming up to the webinar by two companies, two luxury retailers actually, and they're really interested in this because of the Trip Experiences APIs and the ability to customize the experience to the store. Can you still tell a little bit about what's your thoughts and kind of brainstorm on what they could do with that?
Yeah. So first, I think this is an incredibly rich and open area, right? I think that there's a lot of companies that haven't even fully grasped like what the potential is for this. When you start to think about transportation and logistics a little bit differently, when you start to sort of think of it as another primitive that you can use in building out your service.
Yeah.
You know, we're kind of in this mode, and I guess I'm getting philosophical, but we're in this mode of sort of thinking of everything being packaged into an app and having the entire experience of the app be the way in which you reach your customers. But increasingly, I think there's a better opportunity to think more broadly about the service that you're providing. And so Uber can be an extension of that experience. So for example, if I'm at home and I'm doing some shopping, let's say, and you know, really like there's some high ticket item that I'm really interested in seeing or whatever, there are two different ways that you could actually use Uber and incorporate Uber into that experience. One of which could be, well, hey, you know, if you're not sure about this purchase, why don't you just come to the store and check it out? And if you say yes, I will send we will send a car to you and it will come and get you. And, you know, and that's using like the Rides API. On the way, you can imagine that if you do have the app and you use the Trip Experiences API, you will know when the user is actually on the way. You can provide them additional information before they even get there, so they're learning about, you know, additional aspects of it. I don't know. For some reason, I'm suddenly thinking about electronics as opposed to like high-end, you know, retail and clothing.
Luxury bags.
Yeah, luxury bags, right. But I mean, on the other hand, it's like, well, you know, you were interested in this. In the store that you're going to, we also have these other things. And because we know your destination, we can actually surface those things to you. And based on your past purchases, we're going to like set up a whole sort of, you know, opportunity to like to try on a bunch of stuff, right? So in some ways, this spark of interest that maybe gets you into the store then becomes kind of a whole experience. Yeah. And that level of service just doesn't really exist right now. Yeah. You know, everyone that walks into a store is sort of, I mean, beacons notwithstanding, is fairly anonymous. Yeah. You have no idea. And so if you prefer, if you think that that's actually interesting and valuable and you want to have that kind of relationship with brands, I think these APIs provide a foundation for that. The other direction is, as opposed to sort of bringing the person to the store, is to actually send the things, you know, to the person to try out. Yeah. And you can use like the Rush APIs for that, to like dispatch stuff.
So I think also too, like there's this amazing opportunity. Like I actually am not a Beacon fan, right? Because by the time they walk into the store,
right,
your sales representative is already busy with something else.
Sure.
Like, it takes too long to react.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
But if you have like 15 minutes lead time, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So we have to think a little bit when talking about apps, especially to stores. It's not just apps that the consumer is using, but actually the store clerks are using. In fact, almost all the luxury retailers that we've been talking to, especially luxury retailers, they have something they call the Black Book. This is like Nordstrom, they have Black Book, etc. And increasingly, these are all getting digitized, right? So and what they actually do is that they track the high value customers to figure out who are the ones who are most likely to buy stuff, right? So using the Trips API, you can actually notify the clerk that somebody's coming, pull all the information of what they've actually done in the past, see what they've seen on the website, see which stores they came into. There's just so many opportunities for doing this kind of thing. Second thing is that for a lot of our retail stores, I'm talking about retail a lot, they've actually implemented, our more forward-leaning customers have implemented in-store experiences already. Wow. There's no reason why you can't trigger the in-store experiences when the person's in the car, right? Yeah. So you can have them start figuring things out.
Actually, I mean, that sparks like this other idea, which if you want to go all the way down this path of sort of digitizing like the Black Book, right? You could have like the sales associate that's going to be helping you out actually be part of the trip experience that's delivered in the car, right? So it's like when you go there, go and ask for, you know, this person, Alan, let's say, and this person will help you. And here's other information about them, about like their tastes or what they know about or like things like that. You know, like here's their Instagram like profile, so you can see like the stuff that they've been trying on themselves recently or whatever. You know. So anyways, there's a lot of opportunity there.
So we have one question before we get to the demo. There's a question here that says, rider information is PII, since it tells you where the user is in the moment. How do you prevent applications from making it creepy in those kinds of use cases? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, like with just about everything that we do on the platform, user control is actually very important to us. So it's not like these third parties are getting access to information that the user hasn't decided to authorize. I mean, if you've ever logged into, and some people don't, but if you ever log into a website using Facebook, their API allows the third-party application to request information, and the user has control over whether or not to actually follow through with that request. Yeah. So it's a very similar pattern. It's pretty well known, I think, in the industry. So in that case, Also, I should say that every developer that is on our platform and launches their application has to provide a privacy policy.
Yeah.
So if users are concerned about this stuff, they can go do some investigation themselves. And we actually watch this stuff pretty closely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll answer that question actually during my demo.
Okay, awesome. Let's take it away then.
So actually, we have a few more resources that we want to provide just to give a little more context for this before we get into the demo itself. Alex, you're probably super excited.
I am
right?
super pumped.
I know. Super pumped. I mean, first, just sort of at a high level, the Uber API is fairly straightforward. It's using REST. It uses OAuth for authorization. You basically get a token for your user, and you use that to access the resources to make ride requests and so on. And we're using JSON for all of our payloads. So it's very lightweight. A lot of people feel like it's very easy and straightforward to use. So you shouldn't feel any intimidation about that.
Our hackathon is a good example of that actually happening. Our developers never saw the Uber API, first time tried it out, totally worked.
That's amazing. That's great. That's good to hear. High praise that I'll bring back to the team. Okay, and so in addition to having an API that's fairly straightforward and I think easy to use, there are also several tools that will facilitate your integration with the Rides Request API. Specifically, if you have an iOS app, our iOS SDK is actually really great. It's written in Swift. You've got tools to authorize and authenticate users to manage user sessions, and this is to really embed the Uber experience inside of your app. We also offer single sign-on. So if you want to use Uber as your authentication source, this is fairly emergent still, but the idea being that you could get profile information to identify your users if you don't want to deal with authentication. And so we have buttons that allow that. So you can imagine that can be useful both for drivers or for riders. And we also recently launched something called the Ride Requests widget, which brings the entire experience of Uber into the mobile web. And so this is a really useful way if you don't want to go for the full native experience. Now, what's interesting about this is that this product was actually targeted to low connectivity environments. So you'll notice that there's actually not really a map. And that's because in those environments, the maps are either unreliable or not able to be downloaded. And so living in sort of North America and Silicon Valley, it's hard to imagine where you don't have a map to sort of navigate the world. But that is the case in some cases. So that was one of the motivators for the design of this product.
And you can make money off of this, is that true?
Yes, actually, that's a good point. So generally speaking, any new rider that you refer to us, essentially we will pay, I believe it's $5. It's a $5 bounty. So so basically if you're able to find new riders for us, that's a great way of actually monetizing your integration. Thank you for mentioning that.
So all enterprise developers, FYI, put this in.
Yeah, especially as we grow and continue to sort of go into new environments and new markets. If you're there early and you help to actually introduce Uber to more people, that's a great way of actually helping to build a relationship with us and also with and building out our client base.
Just going back quickly to the Ride Request widget, the cool thing about this one is we actually have a web view, so you don't have to program anything. It's just literally just a couple of code lines, and it gives you the screen just right out of the box. So
we manage all the design and everything for you.
Everything is managed.
Yeah. And the last thing sort of that works also in context with this, and then we showed this before in the City Mapper integration. If you want to deep link into our app, we also support that. And we support that in a cross-platform way. So essentially, if the user taps on a link to request a ride, it'll open up in our Uber app, and they'll be logged into their account, and all that process will be taken care of by us. And the last resource that I'll mention is that we have a series of buttons that allow you to integrate just like a ride request thing. So if you have, let's say, anything that has a destination or location in it, frankly, could have an Uber button. And so this makes it very easy to just integrate that. And what's nice about it is it actually pulls in information from our API to give the user more information about how far away the nearest Uber is. So as opposed to having to wait and go and make the request, let's say through a deep link, the buttons will actually ask for that information and provide it to the user. Okay, so awesome. You ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's do it.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, let's switch gear for a few minutes.
Why don't you talk about a little bit what you do, just to give some context?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, my name is Alexander Gravy. I just joined the team 6 weeks ago.
Yes.
I'm a developer advocate on the team.
Old in the tooth already.
So for this particular demo, I actually created a tech demo, and let me share my screen over here. I created a very, very easy to understand, hopefully, UI. I hope it's appearing. All right, there you go. So you should be able to see a map now and some Uber logo and 2 buttons, and that's it. So what I would like to demonstrate is just a very, very basic approach of how to make API calls to the Uber API. Now, for instance, this is the very basic one. It will be just a get to the products, which basically says, give me all the products that are close by to my location, and give me a few more information in terms of how much are they, how pricey are they, how many people can they fit, and so on and so forth. So for this, I just make a get call to the specific endpoint here, and I send 2 query parameters, the latitude and longitude. And then this is the response body. So this is like really what you'll get out of the response from the Uber API. And you can see right away, we have different products over here. There's UberX. We have capacity listed here, and also a breakdown of the fees as well. Now, as you already mentioned in the first place, we would need to get some user context in case we want to actually get some information about the user. Also, if we want to make some requests or some ride requests in order to actually get an Uber, we would need a user context as well. Now, this works without a user context, so this authentication is basically the server token. But if you would like to go into more details, and if you'd like to get more about the user, more information about the user, you can actually authenticate yourself. And hopefully you will see the screen popping up over here, and that's the demo that you were just kind of outlining. That's essentially describing what my application would like to get in terms of data related to the user. So here we can see I'm asking for the profile, the full name, email, photos, the places. Now that's a really cool feature that we have. A user can actually store the places that are that he or she would probably
home and work.
Home and work, yeah. And then I also ask for a request to write feature. So in case I would like to make an actual call and request to write, I would need that. Since I'm the developer itself, the Uber API actually provides me with a bit more information in terms of what other scopes I could get access to if I would want to.
So let's be clear. What you're seeing here is actually, as it says, you as a developer can see these additional scopes.
Yeah.
So this is because you have a developer account, because you're actually building this. This is additional sort of debugging or useful information that you can provide, whereas the permissions shown here are the ones that you're actually requesting from the user.
Correct. Yes.
Now, actually, before we even go further, it's one of those things where we kind of take it for granted, I think. But the fact that this third one here is request a ride. What's so amazing about the Uber API is you're literally using a simple web request to move things in the real world. If you're using the production API as opposed to the sandbox API, and I hope you'll talk about that, a car would actually come to this place to come pick us up.
Yeah.
So it's sort of both magical and perhaps terrifying in that sense that this is really happening, and it's the power of the API that we allow for people to use. Now I should say that any developer can essentially request rides against their own developer account or against other developers that they whitelist to their application. Yeah. But we have to go through and we have to approve you under a whitelisting, process in order to actually request rides on behalf of users. Yeah. So
let me show you what it looks like. Yeah. Let me accept that very quickly and say that my user would authorize this application to get the data. And right away we can see that I got a few more options over here. I can actually pull up my information for the user over here. I can see the name.
This is the profile information,
That's the profile information for the user. And I'm showing the picture over here. Now to step back for a second, since we're talking about the different sandbox and applications and so on and so forth. Now this is over here, hopefully the screen will switch. This is our website, our developer website. It's on developeruber.com. It will give you some high-level information about our products, but what I would like to outline is over here the sign in button. So if we log in, you will see a developer dashboard, and it will show my current applications that I'm maintaining. And over here I created actually an API demo. So let me very briefly switch over here and demonstrate something that's very cool. We're talking about the different scopes, and we're using OAuth to get authorization from the application through the user, through the application. And the general scopes that we can access is the profile, the places. We can also say that we want to use write widgets, and we can also get access to the history if we would like to. So this will provide us all the trip information that happened in the past, and basically could help you to kind of figure out, where people going most frequently, for instance, so you could show pins on the map, for instance.
I think this is really interesting because, what you request from the user really depends on what relationship you have with the user, right? So for example, if you were a luxury retailer, right, you would probably be more, your customer would be more amenable to sharing the saved places and the more...
well, if you have a lot of brand loyalty and a lot of awareness, right, as opposed to sort of a very transactional relationship.
Exactly. Right. So I think it's really important when you're building your app to be very selective of asking what you want. Because if you put that screen and say, hey, I want I want all your history and information like that, but you don't have that loyalty and a relationship, person's just going to go, nope, I'm not going to do it, and all your effort just went away, right?
And I should say, part of the whitelisting process for us actually involves some of that consideration and thoughtfulness. We don't want a lot of apps going and sort of requesting a lot of information for users that don't have the likelihood of having that sort of pre-existing relationship.
So I can't, it's not like Facebook where I can just scrape the entire graph.
I'm pretty sure Facebook is also pretty reluctant about that.
Okay.
We've all learned from each other in the last decade.
All right. One interesting point, and you mentioned it could be terrifying, like requesting the write and making a post call to the request endpoint. But to be completely frank here, you would need to get privileged access in order to get real write bookings.
Yeah.
So if you start off with a developer account and you just create your application in the very first place and you try to like experiment with stuff, you will just get limited access to certain scopes. For instance, over here, the request scope is always included, but just as limited access, which means automatically you would trigger the sandbox. Mm-hmm. And compared to the real world, we actually offer a sandbox where we could kind of like tweak the scenarios, figure out, based on real data, what kind of products are available, how many Ubers maybe are close by, and so on and so forth. But then also, since we have the sandbox features, you can actually control the sandbox environment and say, all right, now in this specific location, we have a search price going on. So I want to kind of tweak my application, figure out how to react to search. And we have many, many different features that are kind of like related to the sandbox, which I would like to outline within the demo. So over here, we started with the get me. I'm getting profile information for the specific user that authenticated. And now let me get the product started away. Over here you can see it's very, very easy. It's literally just an endpoint get call with 2 query parameters. And then what's more interesting maybe is to get the estimates. So over here we're sending a bit more query parameters. We actually say the start location in terms of latitude and longitude, but we also provide a product ID. And this one is pulled in automatically. That's representing UberX right now. So we're looking at the estimates for UberX. And over here, I'm using the cool feature, and I'm just saying, you know what, just bring me back home. I don't even know the latitude and longitude. I don't need to know. I have access to the places scope, and I'm just telling that the user would like to go home. That's it. I don't need to deal with latitude and longitude and background. Don't need to translate, street names or something like that. Now over here, we will see right away the price information for UberX right now. High estimate will be 27. Low estimate would be just $7.25, and low estimate would be $7. We can also see a breakdown in terms of, base fare, distance, booking fee, and everything you would probably see in the receipt if you finish that travel. What's also interesting is over here the pickup estimate in minutes. So that essentially tells me that the next UberX could pick me up in 6 minutes and bring me back home. It will also tell me the trip details over here. It will take me 16 miles to get back home to my personal address, and it will take me 1560 seconds, 26 minutes to get back home right now. So I can right away understand that my user, if he would like to go, if he would like to use UberX, he would take 26 minutes with that ride, and would take him 6 minutes to actually get a cab. So that's the cool information you get right away. And then if we would have a search, I was expecting that we would get a search over here at 10 a.m. in San Jose, but unfortunately there's no search.
Or fortunately.
Or fortunately. I wanted to outline how search works, and I actually wanted to tweak the sandbox a bit, so I implemented a feature to actually disable the search. And controlling the sandbox is literally as easy as that. You'll just send over an HTTP put to the sandbox and the product ID. That's the
Wait, so I want to make this very clear, because I think this is kind of magical, right?
Yeah.
Like on the one hand, obviously Uber is working in the real world, and it's manipulating things in real time.
Oh, this is, yeah.
Right? The network of drivers that are out there, like they're driving around.
We did not disable search for San Jose.
So the sandbox, essentially, as you might expect, is a virtualized environment that has a bunch of parameters, and it's essentially modeling what it's like to have an Uber system in, let's say, some virtual planet someplace. And in that virtual planet, you can change and manipulate different aspects of that reality. Correct. Which could be whether or not surge is actually in effect, it could be the number of cars on the road, it could be things like that.
Yeah.
And so all you're saying is you just make a simple put request, and that changes the environment.
Correct.
To fit the needs that you might want to be testing.
Correct. Yeah. More specifically, you are able to update product details if you're choosing to
and a product
look into
detail
UberX
is like
or
a type
Uber
of
Pool.
Uber product.
Yeah, it's an Uber product, and then you can say if there's any search multiplier or if there's any driver availability. So you can essentially define those 2 parameters.
Got it.
As part of the sandbox. Now, I could click on write request in order to understand if there's any request currently happening right now. But I did not.
From that user?
From that user. For
so
the,
if there's
for
any
the specific
existing
user.
active rides, okay.
Correct. So right now I'm just asking if there's any current ride happening for my user, for myself. And there's none. That's why nothing is updated. Now, let's just use the sandbox again and request a ride over here. I can press on this thing, and then you will see what happens. I'm actually creating a post request to the request endpoint, and I'm sending 4 parameters as a query. I'm sending the product ID, which is again my UberX, and then the start place, and my end place ID, which is again home. Now, I'm using, for this specific demo, I'm actually using the HTML5 geocoding feature. So over here, we'll see a map of our current location. Everybody right now knows where we are. Now, I requested a ride, and in response to that, the Uber API actually sent me over a bit more information to that specific ride request. It's telling me that right now, Uber is processing that ride request. So it's not yet the case that somebody accepted that. I'm not on my way. Uber is just trying to figure out if there's any Uber driver who would like to pick me up. It's also telling me my pickup ID and so on and so forth. Now, everything else is null because we don't have anything yet. Now, let's just pretend.
So essentially, you initiated like a request.
Yeah.
It's gone off. We're trying to match you up essentially with a driver partner.
Correct. And let's just say, I'm going to control the sandbox again. Let's just say an Uber driver would like to pick me up. And he accepts that ride request. Now, pressing over here, literally just one HTTP call to put sandbox request, and that's my request ID for the specific user that I just created. I said, accept that ride. And now if we pull up the details again, you will see right away, there's actually a car appearing on the map. Hopefully you will see it on the screencast as well.
Is this live? Is this really happening?
It's really happening. Hopefully it's coming up. All right, I see it on your screencast. So over here, we will see a picture of the driver who would like to pick me up in the sandbox environment. So that's not real. It's just like
this is the virtual world. But
that's the virtual world.
This is being virtually played out.
Yeah, I was matched with a driver called John. He's driving a Prius car, and that car is over here on this map. So we can actually see it on the map. The cool thing with this response is we can see right away the phone number for the driver. We can see the rating, the picture, the name, and we can display all those information to the user. So they could actually, potentially make decisions about, do I want to call him right now, or will I wait?
So you can launch a call right from your app?
Sure.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, to get in touch with the driver.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Now, we do mask the numbers, but yeah, of course, we put it
Correct,
through. Yeah.
correct. We mask the numbers. And then there's also information related to the vehicle. Now, that's very important because usually you try to figure out, where the driver is.
So you're telling the rider basically, hey, here's what to look for.
Yeah, yeah. Here we have the make, we have a picture, a sample picture, we have the model, and also the license plate that's sent right away through this API call. And over here, that's maybe also very important. Shared false means this is not an Uber pool. That's actually an UberX. So I'm the only guy in this specific car.
Shared equals or shared false.
Yeah. Shared false. Yes. Hopefully the screen is picking it up. All right. So the next step in this whole process would be to start the ride. Right now, we know that some driver would like to pick me up, but he's not there yet. Now let's tweak the sandbox in the virtual environment and say that he actually picked me up, and I'm starting my ride right now. So here it's just literally another put request with the request ID and saying my status is now in progress. So I'm on my way. And if I get the details again, I will see it's in progress. I will see where the driver is right now. So I can see his location over here and also the bearing. So I can actually figure out how to display the icon on my map in order to demonstrate in which direction the driver is going.
Yeah.
And now what would happen in the real world if you would have an application implemented, you would do those calls probably every few seconds in order to get the most latest location.
It's polling.
It's polling. Now, as opposed to polling, you could also use a feature we have called webhooks. And that's kind of the enabler for the trip experiences feature. Webhooks means that if your user authenticates with the webhook feature, you as a developer will get a notification if something changes in terms of ride requests for the user. So if there's any new ride, you will get a notification and you'll be able to react to this. And that's kind of the enabler for trip experiences, which means if I would have a server running and then some user authenticated with a specific feature, I will get a notification saying, hey, this user is actually right now looking for a ride. Now this gives me some time to prepare some content, figure out what I would like to demonstrate, probably get some more information about the user, and so on and so forth. And then I'll get another notification when the status changes saying, all right, now this driver or this ride is in progress. So the guy is on his way, which is probably the best moment for an in-app notification. Like if you have, let's say, the New York Times installed, they could send you an in-app notification saying, hey, you're on your ride for the next 6 minutes. here are the most interesting news happening today.
Well, if you're going to a store, right,
Or
you
a store,
hear all the offers
Right.
and products,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, then the very last step in this process would be to complete the ride, which is fairly, well, it's fairly simple. I could just say, complete ride, and that's it. After that, in the Uber application, you would give a review, and so on and so forth. So that's basically the overall
There's a webhook too, so then when the ride is complete,
Yeah.
your app can actually receive that notification, and let's say you're walking into the store, immediately get some sort of offer or something like that.
Correct.
That's right.
Or notify
whatever.
the sales rep.
Right.
associate.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Totally.
And that's as simple as it is. That's all there is.
Is this online somewhere or?
I'll put it on GitHub right
Okay.
after this recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, this is really cool because I think for a lot of companies with apps, right, especially location-based apps, the biggest
Especially
trouble.
like brick and mortar. If you have
brick and mortar,
the
right?
original sort of app.
You can basically have the user never has to exit the app,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can the user could he might when they're considering about going to a store, they can open up the app and then request it, see the Uber thing come in, the Uber ride come in, then they can start actually getting a store experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
Without ever exiting the app. Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine also if you want to go really out there, you could build or create a whole sort of AR experience or sort of virtual reality experience where you're viewing and seeing the store before you even arrive and getting a sense for what's there, so you know where to go and things like that, depending on, of course, how large your store is.
But that's a super easy one because most premier brands already have an in-store experience, right, in their mobile app already.
Totally. Totally. That's great.
All right.
Any questions?
We had
moment
a few questions here.
Okay.
One question was, for monetization, is it only for new users?
Yes, new users based in the US.
Yeah. Right now, so it's fairly limited right now. We are looking at expanding that at some point, but there's no sort of incremental ride split over time.
And I personally think for a lot of brands, for the indie developer, it's kind of nice. But if you really want to get monetized, it's all about building a great
It's really about the
experience.
service. Yeah, it's really about sort of leveling up what you're already doing and differentiating yourself, I think, from your competitors.
We have another question, which is, can an app developer build a complete Uber experience with more interesting information and capture traffic from the native Uber app? How do you strategize and prevent people from stealing data as you grow the developer platform?
That's
strange. I would have at least two sides.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one side to it is we don't really expose too many sensible information or information that would potentially help you to kind of store.
Actually, it's against our terms.
History. And then the other side is also against our terms.
Yeah. So if you are doing that, then you probably won't be a developer for a while.
And remember, this is whitelisting process, so we need to go through and kind of,
Yeah, so I guess I would say that there's protections on both sides. The idea really is to provide more value and to use Uber as your logistics platform, not as a information harvesting tool.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very important to sort of understand that relationship both with us as the platform provider as well as the relationship to the customers.
Okay, we have a few more questions, but let's get to the UberRUSH API. That is unbelievable stuff.
So far we've gone through the ride request API as well as the trip experiences API. So that should be fairly straightforward. It's really about serving humans and moving humans around, or as we call them, people. The next thing that we want to talk about is delivery on demand. And this is actually a new API that we have released recently, and it's called the UberRUSH API. Now the mission of UberRUSH is to make getting anything in your city more convenient, more affordable, and reliable than going and doing it yourself. And I know, we're all busy these days, and so it's always a hassle to try to find a time to go to the store that's out of the way and miles away or in San Francisco up a hill. So in this case, the idea is let's use a courier or actually the Uber network of drivers to get things to you. So a brief history of the Rush API. Essentially, last October, we opened up to businesses. And essentially what this allows you to do is if you come and you use Uber.com, you can actually dispatch deliveries directly from our website. You have to build anything. You just essentially say, hey, we got a delivery. Courier comes, picks up the thing, sends it off on its way. In January of this year, we opened up the Rush API into a private beta. So essentially we had a limited subset of partners to try out how this would work, to see if it would actually work. And that's really if you wanted to build the entire and own the experience of doing Rush inside of your application. And then just last month in June, we finally actually opened up the UberRUSH API to the world. Now, I should point out that the UberRUSH API and Rush specifically is only available in 3 cities. It's New York, San Francisco, and Chicago. But we're obviously, thinking about expanding into more markets soon. So anyways, if you build now, you'll be in very good position to sort of understand where things are going next. If you remember what I showed you before with the ride request API and that flow, the delivery process is actually basically the same thing, right? So again, instead of a person getting into a vehicle, you're putting a package or a delivery. And so if you want to order something later, you want to schedule your delivery, you can do that. If you want to order something right now, you want to get it delivered, in 15, 20 minutes, you can do that. And then of course, there's the sort of duration of the trip, and then what happens after the item has arrived. So here are the different APIs that are available to service those things. So essentially there's getting a quote, how much is it going to cost to send this thing? There's the deliveries itself, what are the things that are actually out in, being moved around? And then there's information about the delivery itself. So it's fairly straightforward, very similar to the ride request API. Now there's some really interesting examples of people who are building on the Rush API already. This is one of my favorites. It's called Pythagoras. It started out being called Pi. It's a pizza delivery service in San Francisco, and you're like, God, hasn't that been done already? But no, in fact, they've done something actually very magical and different in the world of pizza delivery. However, their magical product, which essentially is, first of all, an amazing pizza. I eat it probably once a week. Secondly, they've built this like arty experience. So you're like, what are these posts, or what are they Polaroids, what are these photos doing next to the pizza? Well, they're artists and designers who are doing this pizza thing. It's very hipster chic. And what they've decided to do is actually include their photography in each pizza delivery. And when the pizza arrives, it actually comes in this really nice, I don't even know what to call the white envelope. And so they're really trying to innovate on the service, on the experience. They're doing something different than just kind of like an ugly pizza box with crappy pizza. But the problem was that scaling that was really, really difficult because they had to build their own delivery network. They had to start, hiring couriers. They had to sort of manage their own fleet, and that just didn't really make a lot of sense to grow their business. So they were stuck in a very small neighborhood in the Mission in San Francisco for quite a while. And by working with the Rush API, they were actually able to extend their delivery across the city. And furthermore, they were also able to make it a lot more economical. Because of the way in which Uber is built as an elastic supply-demand network, Pythagoras only opens up at 6 p.m. and then closes. And so those are the hours where you can actually order stuff. The deliveries are dispatched through Uber. And furthermore, they don't even have a storefront. They essentially use like a test kitchen. And so they don't have to have any infrastructure. So they built up this entire business on a very thin layer, essentially on many other platforms. So I find it fascinating because it really is about building a new kind of experience. This really is kind of about, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, building essentially Uber for X businesses built on top of Uber.
Oh, wow.
So,
recursion. I love it. I love it.
Right? So in this case, there is a drone supply delivery product called Upsonder. I believe this is based in New York. And what these guys are doing is essentially trying to find a way of creating connections between drone owners and people who want to use drones. Mm-hmm. But of course, drones are very expensive. And so you only want to rent them from time to time. And so they're using UberRUSH as a way of getting those drones from one person to another using our delivery network. And so that's kind of it, I guess, at a high level for Rush. We have a few more minutes, I guess, for questions.
Well, actually, let's talk a little bit about art of the possible here. So the reason why I'm really excited about this is because a lot of companies that already have physical presences are literally being threatened by e-commerce companies like Amazon, right?
Sure.
So companies like, so just give you some context here, Amazon first came out with Prime, 2-day free shipping, and nobody can match it, right? And but then companies still manage to say, okay, we have this storefront, there's some experiences that people want instant gratification, and now we're talking about 1-hour delivery with Prime Now, right? And so when I saw this, it was really interesting. It's because it's now finally gives the opportunity for people who've invested in physical locations throughout cities, even though it's very light, they physically invested it to scale out at their e-commerce to an unbelievable level, so that people can actually go to the stores, right, buy your trip and ride the experience, but also have things sent to them. So I think this is kind of like in terms of disruption in retail or or just any kind of local commerce, this is just really unbelievable.
I mean, it's a great point, and I appreciate that you brought that up. It's one of those things, again, that we just take for granted now, where like everything should be delivered like instantaneously, and you forget that there are like actually like tons and tons of businesses out there that are constantly trying to find ways of actually getting their product to their customers in an efficient, effective, affordable way. And I think the fact that Rush is designed to be extremely optimized so that you only use what you actually need, as opposed to, again, managing and building out your own fleet. It's a really great way of, I think, reaching your customers in a new way. And with the API specifically, again, like I would recommend, like, go check out Pythagoras in the App Store. It's only available in San Francisco, unfortunately. But if you try it out, it's a complete experience. And the whole delivery process is managed inside the app because they use the API to basically track the delivery, as we were just doing with the ride, which was for a person, but for your pizza. So you're watching it sort of like, go around the city, and arrive to you, and you've got like a live update. So there's all kinds of opportunities like that. And you can imagine like the satisfaction that customers would receive when they've, purchased this thing through your store, your online website or whatever, or through social media, Instagram, Twitter, Etsy, and so on. And they're watching the product actually sort of get to them.
Okay, great. So we have a couple more minutes for some questions. Let's see if we have a question over here. How do you pick the right experiences coming from developers? Like, what do you do for some? Can you talk a little bit more about that vetting process?
Yeah, I mean, first, pick is an interesting word. I mean, the API is open, right? So anybody can actually go and build a trip experience.
Correct.
And what we're really trying to do is see like what kind of great innovation and ideas people have. Like obviously the reason why we built these APIs is because we're not going to have all the best ideas. People have very useful, very specific contexts in which they want to launch and build experiences. And so rather than kind of trying to predict and build them all ourselves, that's why the API exists. So, I mean, first I would sort of just want to clarify that. Secondly, I guess when it comes to, like the whitelisting process, it's fairly straightforward. If, again, this is what that question's about. As long as you've sort of met a certain, bar or tier. And once you've met that bar, it's fairly easy to get through that process. And then it's like we sort of monitor behavior over time.
Okay, all right. So the other question that is a technical question, which is there like implicit account creation for trip experiences? Is there some
implicit account creation? No, you would need to have a user authenticating through the They need to go through this web interface, and then they need to accept all the scopes that you would like to access. So there's no way to implicitly get access to all the details.
Okay.
And obviously that's to protect the user.
Okay. If anybody has a few more extra questions, is it okay to stay extra 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. Sure.
So one question that I personally had was, how do you see this working in other industries like telcos? Actually, maybe tell us about some of our enterprise customers that you already have for UberRUSH.
Wow, that's a great question. Well, so we've started a pilot right now with Walmart. That's probably one of our biggest. These are a bunch of fairly local experiments, and I mean, there's not too much that I can say, mostly because it's so early. But we are looking at large providers like that have, whether it's like warehouses or storefronts or, just a lot of stuff in places, and working with them to figure out how we can actually hook into their supply chain to essentially automate a lot of this delivery stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we have another question. It's a little bit out there question. Do you guys plan to implement some sort of advertising in the Uber app?
I think a better question is, what's the way that we're going to actually improve the experience with more contextually relevant stuff? So I wouldn't say that we're going to be implementing like advertising in the app, but I'd be looking at ways in which, not only with these APIs, but this context is useful for delivering information that might be commercial in nature to people. I think this is like one of the dynamics that's so interesting, having worked at Google. It's like good ads don't feel like ads, they feel like content. And I think that that's kind of like the bar that we would like to meet, because our business like relies on people wanting to use Uber and wanting to like get from point A to point B, right? So if we screw up that experience with, for example, like the kind of ads that you see in the back of taxis, that's not an experience that's going to drive more usage. So I think we're going to be very careful about the experience and very intentional if we do anything in that direction.
I think it's interesting because the best ads our experience itself,
right.
And I think this is a...
Like free ice cream could be like an ad, but actually, that's one of the ones that you actually want, right?
That's right.
Or kittens.
Some example for something that might not feel like an ad, and I wouldn't say it's an ad. We have something that's called trip branding.
Oh, yeah.
Trip branding.
That's good.
We can actually send over logos and the brand name into the app, and then the app will actually show that specific logo, maybe the location that you're going to.
Yeah, to make them more concrete. For example, let's say that you have a ride, let's say with United, and you open up the United app to check in, and the United app says, hey, do you want to get an Uber? You tap that, it actually will do like a deep link from the United app into Uber, and we'll actually manage and show you like a little bit of like context to say, hey, this trip came from United. And then if you want to go back to the United app, then you can do that. So it's about really kind of maintaining that context between both places.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we're just about up on time. I just want to have a parting word about this. I've personally been prior to Apigee, I was at Amazon, and it was like 2006 when we first launched EC2. 10 years later, it's a $10 billion business, right? And personally for me, like of all the APIs I've seen, this one seems kind of similar. So there's a lot of experimentation going on.
For sure.
But if I were to look 10 years back, I would recommend every developer to try it and try to figure out how to actually get value from that. So thank you very much. This was very helpful.
Yeah.
And we will definitely, you can add questions to, actually we have the community site. You can post questions onto our community. And we'd love to hear more use cases. And if you ever have any kind of use cases that you want to implement, especially if you're an Apigee customer, just let us know on the community and we'll get in touch with you.
Great. Awesome.